Just...
Yes.
Yes, I'm fine. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. So Jyoti is going to be talking on problem-based learning in neuro-ophthalmology. Your introduction was over.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I thank AIOS and ARC for this opportunity. You can see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about certain situations, how we can look at and rule out certain differentials and rightly pinpoint the right diagnosis. So I'll be describing a few cases, starting with case 1. This was a 36-year-old gentleman on tuberculosis treatment, was also on treatment for seizures, was a known hypertensive under medication, and was referred to us for blurring of vision. If you notice, the vision is fine. The color vision, the anterior segment was normal, pupils normal, and fundus was also normal, as you can see. Incidentally, I'll also be discussing two cases because this two cases about how a visual field can help reach a diagnosis. Second was a 29-year-old gentleman which had blurring of vision since 1 month. If you notice that the vision was more or less same in both eyes, color vision normal, IOP normal, and again, pupil and fundus was fine. So we have two situations where everything was normal in terms of our objective evaluation. So what do you do next? So one important point is do a visual field analysis. And I'm going to be discussing how this visual field analysis helped reach the diagnosis. Now, when you interpret a visual field, remember to keep your right side of the field on the right and the left on the left side as shown here. So let's see what came in case 1. As you can see, a field symmetrical in both eyes, and case 2, a similar field, but in only one eye. And let's see how this reaches the diagnosis. For that, I use the power of 6. 6 important questions that you ask when you see a visual field. First, is the field loss unilateral or bilateral? Because if it's unilateral, it's anterior to the chiasma. Unlike bilateral, it would be chiasmal or beyond it. Second, does it respect the vertical meridian? Because if it is, it will be related to lesions at chiasmal or posteriorly. What is a pattern? Which means either quadrant anopia, hemianopia, etc. Bilateral, if it is, then you have to see if the defect is homonymous. What do you mean by homonymous? It is to the one side of the lesion, whether it's in the right eye or the left eye. And these are usually a posterior chiasmal lesions. If it is bilateral and homonymous, we have to find out which side of the field it is. Like in the previous example, it will be the left side because the field defect is on the right. And then finally, if they are congruous, because the more congruous they are, we expect posterior lesion. So let's apply it in our first case. So we have a defect which is obviously bilateral and homonymous and congruous. So we'll call it as left superior congruous central quadrant anopia, which means we have to look beyond the chiasma. That means so central congruous, we looked at the occipital lobe. So let's see the representation there. This is the tip of the occipital lobe, and its representation in the visual fields is central as shown. Hence, we know that this defect will be actually caused due to a problem at the tip of the occipital lobe. And as we know, the representation is opposite. A left superior congruous central quadrant anopia will be causing by a lesion, which is a right inferior calcarine cortex. Hence, with this in mind, we did the MRI scan and it showed the presence of these cysts confirming a CNS tuberculosis. Let's look at the first case. Now we realize that the defect is only in one eye, which is the left superonasal. And as I discussed, the 6 points apply. This is anterior to the chiasma because it involves in one eye. So go back, look at your discs and retina. And if you look carefully, there's actually a nerve fiber layer defect, which is suggestive of glaucoma, probably NTG because the IOPs were normal. So this will tell you how you can go about looking at your fields and reaching a diagnosis. Let's look at case 3. This was a 45-year-old female with a known case of NIDDM, hypertension and hypercholesterolemia on treatment with sudden decrease in vision since 20 days. Vision was right eye 6/6, left eye finger counting ½ meter, left RAPD. A quick reinforcement that when you want to confirm RAPD, we're doing a swinging flashlight as shown here. And every time the light is shown on the affected eye, which is an optic neuropathy, you will see the pupils appearing to dilate because they cannot be, the pupillomotor impulse being less cannot maintain the constriction. So once you have this, you know it's an optic nerve problem. We looked at the discs, and as you can detect, there's a presence of disc edema with a macular star. So is this neuroretinitis? What is neuroretinitis? Descriptive term, an optic disc edema with macular hard exudates and plus or minus vitreous cells. And when you think of neuroretinitis, we're looking at an idiopathic or an infective etiology as mentioned here. So do you think in this times? No. What is important is go back to the history and look at it again. This patient already had ischemic risk factors as mentioned. It was a sudden painless loss of vision, indicating a ischemic onset and profound visual loss. So when you have this, again, go back and look at your discs. If you see there's sectoral pallor, there's mild attenuation of vessels. And if you do an FFA, which can be done, if the patient comes to you early, you will realize there's hypoperfusion. There was a delay in arm to retina time, confirming that this was actually a hypoperfusion at the disc. And 6 weeks later, you realize that the vision continues to remain less. And if you also notice, there is significant attenuation of the vessels, all pointing out that this is an anterior ischemic optic neuropathy and not neuroretinitis. So very important, your history and examination can reach the diagnosis. So take a good history and examine specific to the optic nerve. Now let's look at this another case, 38-year-old lady with decreased vision. Vision was less in the left eye, color vision normal, pupils normal, anterior segment and fundus normal, both eyes of visual fields, and we were thinking of sending this patient to MRI. So what important was ask the proper history. When we asked her the decreased vision, she said incidentally when she closed one eye, she was looking through something, she realized the vision is less. So before you send the patient elsewhere, do a simple test in your OPD, a 4-prism base-out test or under WFDT. So if you look at this one, when you're moving the 4-prism in front of right eye, there's a movement in the right eye and left eye, if you see carefully. But when you use the same base-out prism in the left eye, there is no movement in either eye. This confirms a microtropia or monofixation syndrome. And so this patient had it since the beginning. It's only that we had to detect it in time. If you do the WFDT, that is word 4-dot testing, you'll realize for distance, there is a suppression because this patient has a small scotoma. But if you do it for near, you'll see that it is normal. So this way you can diagnose and prevent unnecessary evaluation. Otherwise, she would have gone and undergone MRI, etc. Now, case number 5, this is a 15-year-old girl came with decreased vision in both eyes. If you notice that the left eye had significant less vision with an abnormal color vision, but right eye had a 6 millimeter sluggish pupil, whereas left eye had a 3 millimeter pupil with an RAPD. Now, before I move on, I want to show how you should be doing an RAPD testing in a patient who has a tonic pupil in one eye. Prior to that, we did a 0.1% pilocarpine test in this patient in the right eye, and it turned out to be positive, confirming the tonic pupil. So let's look at this. This is Finging's flashlight test. Right eye is a fixed dilated pupil. We should be shining light in both eyes, but look at the left eye only because the pupil there is working. So as you move to the left eye, you will see that the pupil is dilated. But as you come to the right eye, it is constricting. So only dilates when it goes to the left eye, indicating a left eye RAPD. So if you notice that this fundus examination showed a pallid disc edema in the left eye. So we have a right eye tonic pupil, left eye anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. So when we did the visual fields, obviously significant involvement was noted. A workup for ischemic factors was needed. And this is the list of ischemic factors that you tend to do in any patient and a cardiology reference. We realized patient had hypertension. MRI brains protocol showed that there was infarcts in the MC and ACA areas, and also a block of the brachiocephalic artery, right ICA, and near total ICA occlusion. So what we had in arteritic AION, because of the near total ICA occlusion, a tonic pupil probably related to total ICA occlusion and therefore reduced blood supply to the ciliary ganglion. So when you have this in an adult, you would always think of GCA. But in a child, you have to look at age-specific systemic vasculitis. And in this case, it was Takayasu's arteritis. And we've also published this in Canadian journals. And quickly, just 10 seconds, a 60-year-old gentleman came with a diagnosis of tobacco alcohol syndrome, 6/18 vision. But if you notice, everything was normal. But when we did see this is the normal disc, normal field. So what do? Do a simple pinhole test, which gave 20 by 20, and a PAM also 20 by 20. What was important is do a direct ophthalmoscopy, which many of us have forgotten. And that showed an oilet droplet appearance. Patient had an anterior lenticonus. And when we asked the history of hematuria, it was present. Basically, it was Alport syndrome. So I want to end by saying that you need to do a perfect visual testing with pinhole. Retinoscopy reflex is also important, refraction, and a thorough slit lamp examination. So basically, small important aspects of history, examination, if you do thoroughly, we will not miss certain things which otherwise go unnecessarily for major investigations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a wonderful talk. I have a question for you, ma'am. What is the protocol that you follow in evaluating NAION in the young?
NAION. So basically, it's very rare to find NAION in our children, which is usually common in adults. But then I would do, as I said, the routine systemic evaluation routine ischemic workup that I had just shown, that we would basically get a blood pressure done, get the routine diabetic workup, and show him to look out for anything which could be a thromboembolic phenomena. In children, we usually have not seen so many cases, but this was one of the cases where I got a TIACI also.
And what is the incidence of fellow eye NAION in your experience, ma'am?
In my case, I've seen about 15% of cases in adults where I've got an NAION in the other eye. But anyway, as in case, if you have found out the associated risk factor and you're able to avoid it, then that could be a better treatment option. But about 15% in my practice.
Thank you so
What
much.
do you think is the
Madam, I had a quick question. Chitra Madam, I had a quick question to Jyoti Madam. In case of these adult NAIONs, what is the preference whether to give posterior subtenon injection versus the oral steroids? If at all oral steroids to be started, in what cases? And what is your priority of the management in these cases of adult NAIONs?
So in case of adult INF, I'm not in favor of starting them on any steroids. I would like to ask Dr. Rohit for his opinion, because I usually just follow them up, find out the associated risk factor and treat that. But I have not started them on any steroids. I would leave them for arteritic, like something like GCA would be the cases where I would start them on steroid, not NAION. Dr. Rohit, do you want to add anything?
Steroids, then posterior subtenons injection would be good enough, Rohit boss?
No. Anyway, nobody's really tried the posterior subtenons, and there's very little doubt that you would really achieve much by a posterior subtenons. People have been advocating oral steroids, and of course we'll have comments from Sachin and Prem about their experience. But as Jyoti said, there is no evidence as of now that oral steroids in any form improve the outcome, the visual outcome, although they have been shown to decrease the severity of edema, but they have not shown any significant outcomes. And unfortunately, we were all part of a very interesting trial that had attempted to see if any other alternative treatments are effective. But as of now, there is no treatment for NAION directly, and steroids definitely in those patients who are diabetic would be a major contraindication. So some people do try steroids, but like I said, it's only shown to reduce the edema early, but no significant difference in visual outcome, and a definite, increased risks in patients who are diabetic. Prem and then Sachin maybe give us an opinion of their experience, please.
Sure. So like you, Rohit, I have really stopped using corticosteroids for the treatment of patients with NAION. Absolutely for AAION arteritic disease, but not for NAION. Not intravitreally, not subtenons, not orally, definitely not IV. I think the data have just accumulated to the point where the risk of using steroids exceeds the potential benefit, which is little to none.
So then what is the ophthalmologist role in
Sorry, after the first paper by Dr. Here, where he said, it's useful in certain limited situations, I used it for a few years, but the risk benefit was never in favor. You had patients going into, diabetic crisis, so it was not worth it. I don't ever do that now.
I think what Dr. Durga had asked is NAION in young is less than 40. I think most of the neuro-ophthalmologists would agree now is we see a lot of patients in the 40s and even 20 to 40 coming up with picture like NAION. Prem and Sachin, what is your workup plan for such patients in the absence of ischemic risk factors? How would you proceed?
So the first thing I do now, and because I look for disc drusen, we just had a publication about the high prevalence of disc drusen in that population. So I do a enhanced depth imaging OCT to see that. And if I find significant drusen, then to me, that's often the answer. I don't do an extensive coagulopathy workup or other investigations. But if they don't have drusen, then I will look to see if they have other risk factors. If they do have some other strange coagulopathy or some other disorder that could be causing them to have the disease. The yield is low, but I think it's important to look.
Sachin?
In the age group of 40 to 50 years, we do see an occasional ischemic optic neuropathy, but less than 40, I think it's a case report. And in those cases, I pretty much do everything, starting with EDI imaging, followed by MRI orbit, and then proceeding with more, invasive neurological workup after that. But less than 40, it is so unusual and rare that the patient has bought themselves a full workup at that time.
I just wanted to add that we would do the sleep apnea study. I was actually looking at, probably she was asking because I showed the Takayasu case, but in a lot of I have lately seen in last 6 months about 5 cases, and of them, we could not find any ischemic factor, but what we found was the obstructive sleep apnea studies were positive for them.